Why don't you just disappear? My stepdaughter snapped during a fight. Her mother joined in. We'd be better off without you. I didn't say a word, just packed my bags. This morning, my phone blew up with 13 missed calls. Before we begin the story, take a moment to support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support means the world to our channel and helps us spread more shocking true stories to light. Now, let's get started. Vanishing from the family photos. The fight started like so many others. Sharp words, hurt feelings, doors slamming. But this time, something shifted. Why don't you just disappear? My stepdaughter, Stella, snapped at me, her voice dripping with frustration. Before I could even process the sting of her words, my wife, Delilah, joined in. She didn't yell. She didn't argue. She just placed her fork down and said, almost casually, maybe we'd all be better off if you did. That was it. No shouting match. No desperate plea for understanding. Just quiet, brutal rejection. I didn't say another word. I stood up, walked upstairs, and packed my bag. This morning, my phone lit up with 13 missed calls. Something felt off. When I stepped into our living room, the silence was too heavy, too unnatural. My eyes swept across the space, searching for what was wrong. Then it hit me. The family photos. They were all still there, perfectly arranged on the walls and shelves. But something was missing. Me. Every picture of me. 3 years' worth of birthdays, vacations, and holidays had been carefully removed. The absence left behind strange, empty spaces in once complete memories. In our big Yellowstone trip photo, I should have been standing between Stella and Delilah, my arm around them both. Now, there was just an awkward gap, a ghost of where I used to be. I stood frozen, coffee cup cooling in my hand, when I heard Stella's bedroom door click open upstairs. Her footsteps hesitated at the top of the stairs. She knew I was here, but instead of acknowledging me, she made her way to the kitchen, phone in hand, deliberately avoiding my gaze. Morning, I said, keeping my voice neutral. The silence that followed was deafening. 3 years of trust gone. 3 years. That's how long I'd been in Stella's life. 3 years of carefully earning her trust. Movie nights, last-minute runs for poster board the night before a project was due, sitting with her for hours helping with math homework. I had never tried to replace her father. I just wanted to be there for her in whatever way she'd let me. And for a while it worked. But now, at 16, something had changed. I knew teenagers could be distant. I expected rebellion, eye rolls, and slam doors. But this was different. This was deliberate. It started last week when I offered to help with her chemistry project. I knew she'd been struggling, and I thought, well, it doesn't even matter what I thought. Her response was like a slap. Stop pretending you care about my grades. You're not my real dad. I'd heard variations of that before, but something about her tone was sharp, edged with something new, something I couldn't quite place. Delilah had been in the kitchen when it happened. She must have heard, but she said nothing. That silence felt like a choice, and things only got worse. Dishes left in the sink, always mine. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Doors closing just a little too hard. Even Delilah grew distant. Whenever I tried to talk about what was happening, she brushed it off. She's just being a teenager, Thomas. Don't take it so personally. But then, last night, everything exploded. Stella had been texting at the dinner table, something we had always agreed wasn't allowed. While I gently reminded her, she didn't just ignore me. She threw her phone down with a sharp clatter. God, why are you always policing everything I do? Why can't you just leave me alone? I took a slow breath. Stella, I'm just trying to... To what? She pushed back from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Play, Dad? I already have one. And then she said it. Why don't you just disappear? Nobody asked you to try so hard. It's pathetic. I turned to Delilah, expecting, I don't even know what. Support? Mediation? Instead, she set down her fork and, in the quietest voice imaginable, said, maybe we'd all be better off if you did. The words sucked the air from the room. 3 years of memories flashed through my mind. The first time Stella laughed at one of my terrible dad jokes, the night she called me in tears after her first heartbreak, the proud smile Delilah gave me when Stella asked me, not her mom, to help pick out her prom dress. I stood up slowly, my dinner half eaten. Okay, I said. Okay, what? Stella challenged, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Uncertainty. If that's how you both feel, I said quietly. Okay. I walked upstairs, pulled out my old duffel bag, and packed. As I zipped it shut, I realized something strange. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't panicking. I felt calm. Downstairs, I heard hushed voices. But no one came up. When I walked back down, Stella was gone, probably in her room. Delilah stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. So, you just leaving? That's your solution? You said you'd be better off, I replied, checking my pockets for my keys and wallet. I'm respecting that. That's not. She stopped, cutting herself off. Whether it was pride or anger or something else, I didn't know. I picked up my bag. I'll be at Ryan's, I said. I'll figure out something more permanent soon. I paused at the door, looking at Delilah one last time. You know, I said, voice quiet. When Stella said those things, it hurt. But hearing you agree, that broke something, Delilah. And then I left. A house without me. I drove to Ryan's in silence. No music, no radio. Just the sound of my own breathing and the occasional turn signal clicking in the quiet. When I pulled into his driveway, he didn't ask any questions. He just took one look at me, nodded, and said, "Guest room's yours for as long as you need." That's the kind of friend he is. I turned off my phone, tossed it onto the nightstand, and dug through my travel bag for the emergency stash of sleeping pills I kept for nights like this. Nights when my thoughts refused to settle. By the time I woke up, sunlight was streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a few blissful seconds, I forgot everything. Then I reached for my phone. The screen lit up instantly, exploding with notifications. 13 missed calls. 8 from Delilah. 3 from Stella. 2 from Quinn, my sister. 27 text messages. For voicemails. I hadn't listened to any of them. Instead, I just sat there, staring at my lock screen, my thumb hovering over Stella's name. After everything that had happened, after the way she looked at me last night like I was nothing, what could she possibly have to say now? But I wasn't ready to find out. Not yet. I pushed my phone aside and walked to the window, watching the morning traffic below. And all I could think about were those empty spaces in our family photos. Maybe they'd always been there. Maybe I just hadn't wanted to see them. A bombshell over breakfast. The morning dragged on in slow motion. I went through the motions, showering, making coffee, pretending to focus on my laptop, but my mind kept drifting back to my phone. The unread messages. The missed calls. Should I break the silence? Ryan didn't push me to talk, didn't press for details. But over breakfast, he casually dropped something that shattered the fragile peace I was holding on to. Miles is back in town. I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. Ryan slid his phone across the table. There, on Facebook, was a photo of Miles Walker, Stella's biological father, tagged at a local restaurant. 2 weeks ago, my stomach twisted. The same Miles who hasn't paid child support in 3 years. The same Miles who missed Stella's last 4 birthdays. And suddenly, everything, the sudden hostility, the fight, the missing photos, made perfect, awful sense. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the messages I'd been avoiding. Delilah's texts had gone from angry, real mature Thomas, running away instead of talking, to concerned, please, just let us know you're okay, to something else. Her latest message stood out from the rest. There's something you need to know. It's about Stella. Please call. I clenched my jaw and kept scrolling. Then another name caught my eye. Quinn, my sister. She never calls me unless it's serious. I opened her text. We need to talk. I ran into Stella at the mall yesterday with Miles. The words sent a jolt through my chest. Before I could even react, my phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another message from Stella. She'd barely spoken to me in days. Now, she was texting me. Something was happening, and I needed to find out what. The look in her eyes. By noon, Quinn was at Ryan's, armed with coffee and that no-nonsense look she always got when she was about to meddle in my life. You look like hell, she announced, dropping onto the couch. Thanks, I muttered. Always good to see you too, sis. She didn't smile. I saw Stella yesterday, she said. At the mall. That got my attention. How was she? Quinn hesitated. She was different. My stomach tightened. Different how? She was meeting Miles for coffee. I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over my face. She didn't see me, Quinn continued. But Thomas, she looked hopeful. That hit harder than I expected. I knew exactly what Quinn meant. That look, the one Stella got when she was trying not to get too excited, like she was afraid to believe something good was actually happening. It was the same look she had when she got accepted into that summer program last year. The same look she had when she thought Miles was coming to her 13th birthday party before he disappeared. I swallowed hard. Did you know he's been messaging her for months? Quinn asked, promising to make things right this time. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Instead, I pulled up Stella's Instagram, something I rarely did. Her latest post was a picture of her and Miles, smiling over coffee. Caption, real family time, red heart. The comments were full of heart emojis. Her friends had no idea what was really happening. Ryan, who had been quietly listening from the kitchen, finally spoke up. Remember what happened last time he showed up? I did. 3 years ago, Miles had swooped in out of nowhere, showering Stella with gifts, promises, and big talk about making up for lost time. It lasted 2 weeks. Then he vanished. Stella didn't get out of bed for days. Delilah and I had spent months rebuilding her trust, convincing her she was enough, that she deserved better. And now he was back, and she was falling for it all over again. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with another message from Delilah. He's asking her to move in with him. She's actually considering it. Please, Thomas, I know you're angry with me, but she needs you. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding. I started typing a response. Deleted it. Tried again. Deleted that too. Because what was I supposed to say? Sorry, you told me to disappear, but now you need me to reappear? The whole situation felt like a cruel joke. Then, another notification popped up. Stella's Instagram story. A picture of college brochures spread out on her bed. Caption, big changes coming. Sometimes you have to choose your real path. My breath caught. Those words. They were Miles' exact words from 3 years ago, right before he moved across the country for his real path and stopped answering her calls. Quinn was watching me closely. What are you thinking? She asked. I clenched my jaw, gripping my phone tighter. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that it's time to stop being silent. The call that changed everything. The moment I made up my mind, my phone started ringing. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost let it go to voicemail like the others. But something in my gut told me to answer. Hello. A pause. Then a calm, professional voice. Mr. Carter? This is Miss Anderson. I'm Stella's guidance counselor at Riverside High. I know this is unusual, but I need to speak with you about some concerning changes in Stella's academic plans and recent behavior. Would you be able to come in tomorrow morning? My grip on the phone tightened. Concerning changes? Stella had been an honor roll student since freshman year. Straight A's. Determined to get into a good college. What kind of changes? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Miss Anderson hesitated. I think it's best if we discuss it in person. That did nothing to ease the knot forming in my chest. I agreed to the meeting and hung up, my mind racing. Stella wasn't just pulling away emotionally. She was making actual, tangible changes to her future. The question was why? I glanced back at Stella's Instagram story, the college brochures, the cryptic caption, and then I saw something else. A text notification from Miles. It was in a family group chat, the one I was still a part of. Great news. Big announcement at dinner tomorrow night. A cold realization crept over me. I had a feeling I knew exactly what that announcement was going to be, and I wasn't about to let history repeat itself. The truth unfolds. I arrived at Riverside High early, leaning against my car as students rushed past, lost in their own worlds. A few of Stella's classmates recognized me, their quick glances and hushed whispers confirming what I already knew. Rumors were spreading. By the time I stepped into Miss Anderson's office, my stomach felt like it was tied in knots. She didn't waste time. Yesterday, Stella submitted paperwork to withdraw from her advanced placement classes, she said, sliding a form across the desk. I frowned, scanning the document. She's also dropping French club and student council, Miss Anderson continued. When I asked why, she said she's transferring schools next semester. The words slammed into me like a punch to the gut. Transferring? I echoed. To where? Miss Anderson hesitated. She requested her transcripts be sent to 3 schools in California. My chest tightened. The same city where Miles just bought property. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand down my face. It was all coming together now, the sudden shift in behavior, the anger, the fight, the missing photos. It had never been about me. It was about him. I pulled out my phone and opened the group chat. Miles' text. Big announcement at dinner tomorrow night. Let me guess. He was planning to tell everyone that Stella was moving in with him. Mr. Carter? Miss Anderson's voice pulled me back. I wanted to reach out because this doesn't seem like Stella. She hesitated. She's been so focused on her future. Her grades, her college plans, it just doesn't add up. I nodded slowly. It didn't, unless there was something or someone convincing her this was the right choice. I stood up, shaking her hand. Thank you for telling me. But even as I left the school, my mind was already racing, because I had a terrible feeling this wasn't just about a fresh start. Miles was pulling Stella into something, and I needed to figure out what before it was too late. The scam. I drove straight to the house. Delilah's car was in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I could see her pacing, phone pressed to her ear. The second she spotted me, she rushed to open the front door before I could even knock. He asked her for money, she blurted out. No preamble, no hesitation, just raw panic. I froze. What? Her college fund, Thomas. Delilah's voice cracked. He's been filling her head with promises about some startup, telling her if she invests now, she'll make enough to pay for any school she wants. The room tilted slightly. He's scamming her, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Delilah nodded. She doesn't see it that way. She thinks he believes in her dreams. But he's finally stepping up. I sank onto a chair, exhaling slowly. Where is she now? Delilah looked away. Coffee. With Miles. Again. Of course. I glanced around the kitchen. Everything looked the same as when I left, except for one glaring detail. The space where my keys used to sit. My usual coffee mug missing from the drying rack. My absence wasn't just emotional. It was physical. I had been erased from this house. But Miles? He was making himself at home. Why didn't you tell me he was back? I asked finally. Delilah swallowed. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I kept them apart, she wouldn't. She shook her head. And then you and Stella had that fight. And she said those things, and I panicked. I sided with her because I was afraid if I didn't, her voice dropped to a whisper. She'd choose him completely. I looked at her for a long moment. There were 1,000 things I wanted to say. 1,000 ways I could tell her how much her silence had hurt. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, we needed to stop Miles. Before I could respond, the front door opened. Stella walked in. The moment she saw me, she froze. Her makeup was done carefully, her hairstyle just right, her nails freshly painted, things she never used to care about. And she was wearing an expensive jacket. Miles bought it. I didn't even have to ask. But what hit me hardest weren't the details of her appearance. It was her eyes. They were red. She'd been crying. Cracks in the facade. Stella's eyes flickered toward me, then away just as fast. She squared her shoulders, like she was preparing for a fight. What are you doing here? The usual edge was in her voice. But underneath it, a hesitation, a crack in the armor. I kept my tone steady. Dropping your AP classes? I asked, what happened to Stanford? She rolled her eyes, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Plans change. No, I said quietly. Miles changed them. Something flickered across her face. She crossed her arms, gripping them tighter than necessary. He has connections out there. The startup is guaranteed to take off. If I invest now, I won't even need student loans. I exhaled slowly. The way the classic car dealership was guaranteed. I asked, or the food truck franchise? Her jaw tightened. That was different. I pulled out my laptop and opened the files I'd spent the morning gathering. I did some digging, I said, flipping the screen toward her. Want to see Miles' business registration status? His credit report? Or maybe the 3 pending lawsuits from his last guaranteed investment opportunity? Her fingers twitched. She didn't take the laptop, but she didn't walk away either. Instead, she stared at the screen as I scrolled, her lips parting slightly, the careful facade starting to splinter. Then she reached the lawsuit from his previous stepdaughter's grandmother. The woman was suing Miles to recover the college funds he had borrowed. The first tear fell. He said, her voice wavered. He said he's changed. that he wants to make up for lost time, that we could be a real family if. She stopped. I already knew the rest. If you chose him, I finished softly. Her chin trembled. He said you're the reason he stayed away, that you took his place. Delilah let out a sharp breath, pressing a hand to her mouth. I stepped forward, lowering my voice. Sweetheart, you know that's not true. Her phone buzzed. Another text. From Miles. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, slowly, she turned it off. Completely. I need to think, she whispered. Then she turned and walked upstairs without another word. We let her go. Sometimes, space is the kindest thing you can offer. I am done writing. Midnight confessions. Hours passed. Delilah and I talked, really talked, for the first time in weeks. About Miles. About Stella. About us. About the mistakes we'd made. The ones we could fix. And the ones we'd have to live with. By midnight, I was getting ready to head back to Ryan's when my phone buzzed. A text from Stella. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. I messed up. Everything's messed up. Can we talk? A pause. Then another message popped up. Not about Miles. Not about money. Just, remember when we used to get ice cream after my dance classes? And you let me rant about school drama? Could we maybe do that? My breath caught. Then one last text. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm parked outside the ice cream place. I grabbed my keys. By the time I pulled up, I spotted her car in the lot. She was sitting in the driver's seat, phone in her lap, probably working up the courage to come inside. The place was closed, but the owner knew us. We'd been coming here for 3 years. Tonight, he was staying open late. Just for us. I stepped out of my car, inhaling the crisp night air. And then, finally, I saw her open her door too. Sometimes, the hardest conversations start with the smallest steps. Or, in this case, with mint chocolate chip ice cream at midnight. The moment everything changed. Stella sat across from me in the dimly lit ice cream shop, stirring her melted scoop of mint chocolate chip with a plastic spoon. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. And for once, that was okay. Then, finally, she sighed. I don't even know where to start. Anywhere, I said. We got time. She nodded, staring at her ice cream like it held all the answers. Then, in a small voice, she said, I wanted to believe him. I stayed quiet, letting her keep going. He made me feel important, like I was finally enough for him. She sniffed, blinking quickly. I mean, he chose me, right? After all these years, he was saying everything I wanted to hear. That he was proud of me. That I was smart enough to help him build something real. I gritted my teeth. No, he didn't choose her. He chose her college fund. But I didn't say that. Because she wasn't stupid. She knew. She just didn't want to. She let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. And I fell for it. Again, like a total idiot. I leaned forward. Hey, my voice was gentle but firm. You are not an idiot. She blinked, looking up at me. You're a kid who wanted to believe her dad cared about her. I held her gaze. That doesn't make you stupid, Stella. That makes you human. Her lip trembled, and for the first time in days, she let her guard slip. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. I don't know how to undo everything I said. The way I treated you. Mom. Everything. I exhaled slowly, giving her a small, sad smile. Do you remember what you said at my wedding? I asked. She frowned. What? I nodded. Your speech. Her brows knitted together. Yeah, I think so. I leaned back, watching her carefully. You said sometimes family finds you when you're not looking for it. Her breath hitched. And you were right. I continued softly. I wasn't looking for a daughter, but I found one anyway. Her face crumpled. And then, for the first time in a long time, she reached for me. I pulled her in, wrapping my arms around her as she buried her face in my shoulder, shaking. And just like that, the wall between us shattered. A different kind of justice. By the time I dropped Stella off at home, her eyes were puffy but lighter, like the weight she'd been carrying was finally starting to lift. But something was still nagging at me. Because this wasn't just about hurt feelings or bad choices. Miles had been manipulating her. And he wasn't just after her money. He was running a scam. And I wasn't about to let him get away with it. That night, after Stella went inside, I made some calls. Quinn had a friend at the SEC, someone who knew exactly what to look for in an illegal investment scheme. Ryan had contacts in the DA's office. By morning, I had everything I needed. Miles had no idea what was coming. The setup, The big dinner was happening that night. Miles had rented out a private room in an upscale restaurant, inviting Stella, Delilah, and even some of her friends' parents. More potential investors. More people to scam. I arrived just as the appetizers were being served. Miles was in his element, flashing his signature easygoing grin as he pitched his guaranteed startup. All it takes is one good investment, he was saying. This isn't just about money. It's about family building something together. Right. The same lie he fed Stella. I stood up, straightening my jacket. Before we continue, I said, my voice calm but firm, there are a few people who'd like to join us. Right on cue, 2 federal agents and a state investigator stepped into the room. Miles' confident expression faltered. Oh, what is this? This, I said, crossing my arms, is the end of the scam. Checkmate. Turns out, Miles wasn't just running one scheme. He had 7 different fraudulent businesses across 3 states. And the best part? He documented everything. Every lie, every false promise, every illegal investment pitch, all in text messages and emails to Stella. He had been so sure she'd never turn on him. But she did. When she handed over the messages to the investigators, his fate was sealed. The families he was targeting, they were wearing wires. Everything he said tonight was recorded. Miles tried to run, actually knocked over a waiter and bolted for the door. He made it 3 steps before security took him down. As they cuffed him, he turned to Stella with that manipulative puppy dog expression she had fallen for so many times. Sweetie, this is all a misunderstanding, he pleaded. Tell them I'm your father. Stella stood up, shoulders squared, voice steady. My father, she said, grabbing my hand, is standing right here. And just like that, Miles Walker was out of our lives. For good. The aftermath. Miles' arrest made the news. More victims came forward. More families share their stories. In total, he had stolen over $2.3 million. Now, he was facing 15 to 20 years behind bars. And his so-called tech startup never existed. Just a fake website with stolen photos of a real company's office. But the real victory wasn't seeing him in handcuffs. It was everything that came after, putting the pieces back together. The next day, Stella packed up every photo she had of Miles and handed them to the investigators. Evidence, she called it. Then, she reapplied for her AP classes. The school was understanding, given the circumstances. Her friends' parents, the same ones Miles had tried to scam, formed a support group for families affected by fraud. Something good out of something awful. And Delilah and I, we started counseling. There was trust to rebuild, wounds to heal. But that night, as I watched Delilah carefully placing my photos back into the family albums, straightening each one, I knew we were going to be okay. A new chapter. The next morning, Stella came downstairs early. She had an envelope in her hand. I found this in my room, she said, sliding it across the table. It was investment paperwork. Miles had given it to her a week ago, asking her to mail it. She hesitated. I thought, maybe you want to add it to the evidence file. I looked at the envelope, then at her. Want to deliver it to the investigators together? I asked. She grinned. That real, unguarded smile I had missed. Can we get ice cream after? The final word. Some people might say the revenge was too harsh. That family is family, no matter what. But real family doesn't try to steal your future. Real family protects you, even if that means protecting you from someone who shares your DNA. Miles' sentencing is next month. Stella is planning to read a victim impact statement. She's been working on it for weeks, revising each word carefully. Yesterday, she asked me to read it over. It needs a good ending, she said. Something that shows I'm not just his victim anymore. I think she's already found it. It's in the way she holds her head up now. The way she's helping other kids recognize scams. The college brochure's back on her desk. Her real path, not the one Miles tried to sell her. Because sometimes moving forward isn't just about healing. Sometimes it's about making sure the past can't hurt anyone else. And sometimes the best revenge isn't just watching someone face consequences. It's thriving despite them. Tonight, we're having dinner. Just the 3 of us. Stella is making her famous pasta sauce, the one she learned from watching cooking videos with me during lockdown. Normal, boring, wonderful, the kind of thing Miles will have plenty of time to think about. from his cell. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you next one.